We have such an incredible guest with us tonight. And I'm Janet Childs, and I'm part of the Educational Committee. And I see some of my Educational Committee members here. Yay! Wonderful to see you. And we are with the Universal Church of the Master. And this is our educational series. And we have the deep privilege of bringing about our wonderful Farima Berenji with us tonight, talking about the cultural roots of Zorastatism and Mithraism. And what that means is the roots of mystical thinking were founded in Iran. The philosophy of Iranian mysticism by nature fosters adoption of other cultures. So this is a cultural feast that we are about to enter upon. It is not based on a single source, but on multiple. Many rivers come to that same ocean, and we are going to be acknowledging many of them. Many of today's modern holidays, festivals, religious traditions, dance, and even children's fairy tales of Hollywood movies have been based upon the myths and beliefs of the ancient Persian religions. This lecture by Farima reveals some of the mysteries of these religions and how they shaped our modern culture, beliefs, and traditions. And let me just share a few words about Farima. She's gotten her Master's of Arts in Education degree in anthropology and archaeology. So for those of you that know, anthropology and archaeology, two very different traditions. She also and with special emphasis on Persianate studies and dance ethnology. This is huge because this is an area that has not really been touched, I believe, in so many ways. And so we are so excited. She also holds a BS in health science with a minor in art history and performing arts. Following her education, Farima completed her residency with the UN writing her archaeological thesis, Cross-Cultural Education, a dialogue amongst cultures, and her anthropological dance thesis, Poetry in Motion. That is all a poem, just reading that. She continued her UN research and writing on excavations of Iranian archaeology, emphasizing the preservations of ancient and mystical dances of Indo-Iran. Now, this is very important, my friends. Some of these would have been permanently lost had we not reclaimed them. These are very sacred, very ancient, formative dance that has just informed a spiritual tradition for centuries. Farima's dance and spiritual training spans years of intensive research with master artists, scholars, and spiritual teachers worldwide. So we are so privileged and fortunate to have you here with us, Farima. And before we begin, I'm just going to introduce Corey Gott, who is our UCM president, and we're just going to invite you to say a few words. Corey, I know you have to get off the meeting pretty soon, but I just wanted for you to be able to have a moment.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Farima, for being here with us tonight.
Thank you.
This is a wonderful gift you are giving our people as well as your students who are coming. So that is absolutely great. And I just want everybody, just keep an open mind tonight. There is a lot to learn. And so I am very grateful that you are here and that we are all here. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And we have a tradition on our educational series, and that is, Farima, to light the candle. It has become kind of the universal theme of that we are the light and that we can bring our light even to the most difficult circumstances. And we've chosen this for you because you truly are the heart of light.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so with your permission, we will light the candle.
Beautiful.
And also holding all peoples in this light, holding all peoples who are struggling right now and who are suffering in any way. And may we bring peace, may we bring our light of intention for healing, peace, and love. And just for our beautiful Farima, this candle, I don't know if you can see it, has little hearts embedded on it. So,
Thank you.
yay.
Beautiful. Thank you
So
so
thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you. Lovely. Okay. Well, first I want to say Happy International Women's Day. It is it's such a beautiful day for me to actually give this lecture. It's and thank you so much for joining, and it's an honor to be chosen as a lecturer here. It's thank you so much. It really is an honor to have you guys all here. So while I'm giving my stories and lecture, please feel free to ask questions, and if there's anything that you want me to cover that I didn't cover, feel free to ask as well. So let's start our journey with the land of Persia, and what Persia is, what Iran is, and this beautiful mysticism and culture that we have today. A lot of it comes from that, and a lot of, like Janet said, a lot of our fairy tale stories, a lot of Hollywood movies, believe it or not, comes from that, and a lot of the names that they use in these books and movies, it's actually a Persian name. So we're going to just briefly talk about a little bit of those stuff as we go on. When we talk about Persia, it is also important to understand that we are talking about the Iranic land, the land of Iran. When we say Iranic, it literally covered so many areas. We are talking about the countries today known as Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, even Oman, and parts of Sahara and Romania. All of those, and parts of Greeks, of course, they were all part of the Iranic land. So when we do say Iranic, we have to understand that there was a time where all these cultures came together, and we have this era which we call Pishtadiyan, meaning the mythical age, the age where we don't have much written. It's all been now oral history, because a lot of the things that were written about the era of Pishtadian, unfortunately, was destroyed by the Greeks. And mainly Alexander, when he came and burned Persepolis, a lot of our facts and historical books were destroyed. He had a tendency to always destroy books. He didn't like libraries much. So unfortunately, the library of Persepolis was destroyed, and so we lost many things. But what I like to focus on here is the era of Mithraism and the era of Pishtadian going into Kianian. This is the mythical age. This is the age where there were seven kingdoms within the Iranic lands that were fighting over the ring of power. This ring of power and this one throne. Now, you might actually hear this story in a movie called The Lord of the Rings or The Game of Thrones. There were seven kingdoms within this, the vast the Iranic land. And these seven kingdoms all wanted to fight over this throne. And this throne had a power. It had a power. It had a ring, and this ring was made out of the sacred mountain, that was basically a volcano, and it was fire. It was always fire was burning, and so it was believed that whoever had this ring, had this throne, could rule the world, could rule the seven kingdoms of the Iranic land. And so the story begins. This mythical age begins of these seven kingdoms fighting over this ring, and this is the era of the Mithraism. This is the era that we had seven gods and goddesses, and so we have Mitra, and then we had the goddess Anahita, the goddess of all waters and the source of life, mother goddess. And mother goddess was Anahita. So we have Mitra, the sun god goddess, and Anahita, the source of all waters. And so the prophecy is, this age is that the world of this Iranic land was created in seven creation. One was that Anahita was born out of a lotus flower in the Caspian Sea. She came up from the Caspian Sea. She rose up riding a chariot by 4 horses, being carried by 4 horses, hail, rain, thunder, and waves. These were her 4 horses. And then she basically threw her staff down onto the soil and awakened the goddess of Ameretat, which was the goddess of nature. So Ameretat, then they gave us trees and flowers and the soil. And from this, the god of knowledge was born. Then from there, the creation of animals and humans were created. And so we went on and on about the 7th creation, and the 7th creation was basically fire. And you notice that the 6th creation was human. We were the 6th creation, and so human, as you know, in many cultures, number 6 is evil. Number 6 is not a good number, and so we were that number 6, and so we needed something to destroy evil. We needed something to destroy our ego, and so 7 came, and that was fire, the source of light. And so fire came, and we were complete. Human beings were complete, and so this was the creation. However, the humanity remained there was this evil source in humans. And so what happened was that they knew that this ring of power that was gifted by God or Lord or light, if you catch this ring, then you can be Lord, you can be God. And so humans went after this ring to try to catch this ring. And so this war we call the 7,000-year-old war began between this mythical age and the humans. And so this 7 kingdom fought over this ring. And so this went on. And later on, this whole 7,000-year-old history of Iran, which was before written civilization, before written, became an oral tradition because everything was lost. And so finally, after thousands and thousands of years of war and destruction, we had a king that came. His name was Jamsheet, and that's how we have Persepolis, Takht Jamsheet, the throne of Jamsheet, who's known as the mythical king. And I will share a picture. Jamsheet comes along and realizes that he is the one that can unite all the 7 kingdoms. And so he united the 7 kingdoms, and goddess Anahita gave the ring of power to Jamsheet. And he united everybody. And so it is believed that from there, it was then this Iranic land became the Persian Empire. It became the land of the Parsis, which we know of today. So it became one empire rather than all these 7 kingdoms being all fighting together. And so this is the mythical age. This is the age we say Pishtadian. We don't have so much facts, but there is a book called the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. And this Book of Kings tells the tales of these mythical age of Iran. And when you read the Shahnameh, when you read this mythical age, that is the book that you realize, wow, the Lord of the Rings, the Game of Thrones, Narnia, Star Wars, all of that are actually taken from the Book of the Kings of Iran, the Shahnameh. Everything that you see in these movies, when I was watching them, I was just like, I've read this before. I know this. This is basically our history. Even the names, you see Aslan, Laya, so on and on. All of these have been taken from the Shahnameh. Even when the writers of Lord of the Ring and the Game of Thrones, they actually wrote articles, and they wrote in their biographies that they did take these influences from the Persian book of the Kings. And so this Book of the King, the Shahnameh, really tells the tale of these ancient religions, culture, dances that were lost for thousands of years. And so they brought it back. But the only way they could bring it back is it was from a form of a fairy tale stories and form of mythical stories. And I believe in, my grandmother used to always say that believe in fairy tales because once they were true. Fairy tale books, fairy tale stories were true stories. So you need to believe them, that they were at one point true stories, but unfortunately they were changed from time to time and they became just legends and fairy tales. So here we have the legend of Mitra, the sun goddess and god, and I want to share this image with you. Let's see here. This is Mitra, or Mitras, that was the Greek name. And mainly, another thing I do want to say is that when the Greco-Romans came to Persia, you have to understand that mainly history is always written by the invaders. The history is never written by people who succeeded something or had something. They were always written by the people who took power, who invaded, and they wrote history in their own benefit. So what happened was that Mitra here she was known as the sun goddess, Lady Liberty and Justice. Okay, she was known as this, and let me share another photo if I can. Here we go. Okay, and you can see here, this statue is actually in Iraq, in modern day Iraq, where at the time it was the Persian Empire. She is known as the goddess of the sun. Now, in her head, there are 7 rays that represents the unification of the 7 kingdom, represents the 7 gods and goddesses, and she is holding a torch. She is holding fire, which was later became the sign of Ahura Mazda, which we're going to talk about. So she is holding the sign of fire, and it was believed that when you conquered a land in the Persian Empire, instead of killing people, instead of ruining their lives, you would actually start to educate them about culture, about love, about history, and you would place the statue of Mitra in the main square, meaning that justice and liberty and freedom has come along. And so it was this Lady of Justice that we see actually in New York City. So this is an influence of Mitra, the sun goddess. A lot of people don't know that when they visit New York, they're actually visiting a Persian sun goddess. So this is the history of Mitra, Lady Liberty, Lady of Justice, with the 7 rays across it. So during the time of Pishtadian, this mythical age, the Persians believed in the sun goddess, the Mitra. And so when the Greco-Romans came and conquered the land of Persia, they didn't like the fact that women were they were ruling the Persian Empire, because it was believed that women were first the living goddesses. They were the rulers. So this, in fact, they didn't like it. And one of the things actually, Alexander was asked, why are you invading the Persian Empire? He said it was because of its powerful woman. So he actually really admired the Persian strength, admired the goddess. He was actually trained by Aristotle, as you know, and Aristotle actually visited the Persian Empire many times and believed in the concept of Zoroastrianism and Mithraism. He actually taught Alexander the concept of the sun god, and so Mitra later changed for the Greek Romans to Mithras. It became a man rather than a woman. So it was at that time when the Greeks were actually really started to admire. I have to give this credit to the Greeks. They actually started to really admire the Persian way of thinking of Zoroaster and Mithraism. So they took it into Greece. And so a lot of the gods and goddesses of Persia were later changed. They actually took them and they were changed. So for example, Anahita, the goddess of water, guess what? It became Poseidon, the god of war and water. Diana, the goddess of love, became Nike. So you could see that all these gods and goddesses of Persia then later changed into more of a Greco-Roman gods and goddesses. So I will give that a credit to them. They actually admired that part of the Persian Empire. And yes, they actually did really believed in the Zoroastrian teaching. And so we will now talk about that. So at the time when finally the Persian Empire was united, um, when the King Jamsheet came to the throne and united all the kingdom, we believe that the virgin goddess Anahita then later gave birth to a light from Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda, which was the god, the light, the source that we don't see, through its fire, then gave a blessing to the virgin goddess, and the virgin goddess Anahita gave birth to Zoroaster. Okay, the fire, the symbol of fire that we see today. It was at this time that, of course, we say that one God, the monotheism came, the source of fire, this light came through. And so the Persians believed that they had to be, they worshiped the sun god. And so many now that I'm going to be talking about, so many of our modern religion cultures now dates back to the time of Zoroaster. So let's start by this. Let's say Jesus. Okay, Jesus, they say that was born under the star. Well, Zoroaster was also born under the star. We say that the time that Jesus was basically turned wine to water and bread and gave bread. Well, guess what? If you go to a fire temple, and if you are celebrating the Mitra day or Yalda, when the time of the light is born, they drink wine and they have bread because they believe that wine is the blood of Ahura and bread is the body of Ahura. So we also have that tradition. In this tradition, we are talking about 1,600 years before the birth of Christ. It was believed that Zoroaster also turned, he went into the people and guide them in order to be given the light. And behind me, you could see that fire. This is the fire that we believe the ring of power was made of. And this fire is still burning. It's still burning. It is a fire that's been burning for thousands and thousands of years, and it's still burning in the mountains. And the source of it is in a city called Yazd, a fire temple, and it's still burning. And you could see that the man with the white beard, who is known as wise man or the wisdom, he is known to be the light who is guiding Zoroaster to go and teach people. They are wearing white, meaning the symbol of soul, the symbol of nothingness. And later, this color of white, of course, became very well known in the Sufi tradition, where women or men would wear white to start dancing. So this white costume, this white ritual became very important. Zoroaster, of course, had 12 followers, which were known as the 12 wise men. And one of them, of course, that 12 betrayed him. It betrayed him because, and so we don't know the cause of the death of Zoroaster. Some say he was killed by the betrayer, and some say it was natural causes. But we do believe that he had that Ahriman, the Dark Lord, betrayed him, and so this evil source Ahriman betrayed him, and so Zoroaster was killed and died. 3 days later, Zoroaster was born, and this is why we paint eggs during Persian New Year, because we believe that out of that egg, Zoroaster was born again. 3 days after, we celebrate that, and he became a falcon, an angel force, a man with wings. So he became a falcon, and so it is always with us. This angel is always with us and guiding us. So these are some of the sources that we have. Now, what I like to show here, and there's another photo of the, let's see here. There we go. Let's see. Let me know if you could see this. So this is basically the Zoroaster or God, the angel man, that is basically Zoroaster was reborn of. And I'm going to go over the symbolic of this, and you might find some of them very interesting and how they are so related to our modern culture. As you can see, it is a human head, which with a beard, which represents knowledge. This number one represents knowledge, this knowledge of wisdom, that you are close to God. He has a crown on that represents God, king, that no one can be higher than a king. He has his right hand up, meaning receiving the light from the source, receiving from the right and giving away from the left. And in whirling or sacred dance that we do, we're always turning our right, bringing our right hand up into the divine and then giving this beauty from the left. So we are turning that direction. He is holding the ring of power, the ring that united all the kingdoms together, the circle of life. Okay. And on the bottom, there is another ring, and that is the ring, that is the circle of our life as humans, that we go, whatever we do, this karmic law, whatever we do, it's going to come back to us. So we should be good and do good things. The wings, of course, represent angels, and the three steps wings that you see at the bottom are the sayings that we say: good deeds, good words, and good thoughts. You also notice that there are two horns at the bottom, and that is the representation of evil or ego, meaning that man should be careful, because if you are not careful, those horns might come at the top of your head. So if we let go, if we started to bring that darkness in us, then the horns will take over. Right now we have a crown, meaning the light of God, but if we are not careful, then the horns will take over. So this is the symbol that is now very famous, and it's known there as the Persian symbol of the angel form of Ahura Mazda or Zoroaster. There's a couple of things that I also wanted to mention about some of the holiday, the traditions that we celebrate. So let's talk about Christmas. Of course, Christmas, as we know, it is on the 25th of December, but according to actually ancient mysticism and ancient tales and Avesta, which is the holy book of Zoroaster, it was said that actually Christmas was it was not on the 25th. It was the solstice, the night of the winter solstice. Christmas became later famous because of the Roman Empire, that nobody was celebrating, the Christ Day. So they were always celebrating Mitraism Day on the 21st. So they kind of changed it, and it became famous later on, but it was always being celebrated on the 20th or the 21st. Now, during Christmas, as you know, it was believed that we went and planted trees. We planted trees. The Persians believed, Ahura Mazda mentioned that you should never destroy trees. You should actually plant a tree. You should not cut a tree. So this is why in Persian Empire, there were so much trees that they used to call them paradis, meaning the paradise of the world, because there were so much trees. And it was a tradition that on solstice night, you would go and plant trees. Then you would have a celebration around around the tree. Every year you would go back to your tree and you would celebrate. You would exchange gifts. You would hang stuff on your tree. And so this is the form of a celebration that you could see so similar to how we celebrate Christmas Day, we're having a tree. It was also believed that during Christmas time, or during the time of Day of Thanksgiving that we have, if you see a family that was poor, or they needed something, of course, you didn't want to make it obvious and go and say, here, I want to help you, because maybe that family didn't want it to be known that they don't have much. So what they would do is they would go and put food in their shoes outside, so that, and they could get these gifts and their food from the shoe. And so now we know during Christmas, this tradition of stockings, how we put gifts in stockings, it actually comes from that tradition of how the Persians used to actually put food in shoes, so that people don't realize who you are, so they don't see face to face. So maybe that person doesn't feel bad. So it was a hidden thing. They would hide the gifts in the shoes and give it to them. Also the star that we put on Christmas in our tree, again, it was believed that when in Persian mysticism especially, when you pass the 7 levels, when you unite the 7 kingdoms, when you unite the 7 gods and goddesses and the angels, the 7 comes together, and the last point is that last point, the star of 8. So what happens is that you become a superstar. You shine, your face shines, your whole body shines. You're famous. You become this glowing star. And so the symbol was that once everything is united, that night everything was glowing, everything was it was beautiful. And so later on, the tradition was that you put that superstar on top of a tree. It is 7 plus that one that points to God, points to the light. So that is basically the ritual of Christmas and how it was being celebrated. Now, and of course, in the tradition of Mitra Mass, we know that in the Western culture, later on, Sunday became the holy day. Sunday was the day that people would go to churches or pray. However, this actually comes again from an Iranian tradition of Mitra, because she was known to be the sun god, the sun goddess, and the culture of the mystic culture, which we call Yarsan, meaning the companions of the sun, they would actually worship this sun. And so later it was the Greco-Romans said, well, you know what, again, praying on other days is not that famous. Let's just bring her name into it, or his name into it, and call it the sun day, the prayer day. And so this companions of the sun became Sunday prayer day, where they would still go and pray. So this is how, again, prayer days on Sundays became this beautiful mass day of worshiping the sun god. Now let's talk about some of the rituals, some of the important elements. We have the sacred elements of Iran, the 4 sacred elements: wind, fire, water, and earth. And of course, we believe that once these 4 are together, they form a cross, meaning they are united. The 4 directions are united, the 4 sacred, and they form that circle, this cycle, this wheel of circle. And so they are coming together to create unity. Unfortunately, this symbol was actually on the flag of the Persian Empire, believe it or not, until 1945. And unfortunately, one crazy man came along and stole this sign and made it a very horrible sign. And you all know it as the SS sign. This SS sign was actually the sign of goddess Mitra, believe it or not. It was a unification of the angels. And Hitler was the one who actually stole it and destroyed the sign. And so it was after 1945 that this flag of the Persian mysticism of Zoroastrianism was forbidden and was taken down. But until then, this wheel of life was considered to be the 4 angels. Those 4 elements was considered to be the 4 angels, and later it was changed into something bad. Unfortunately, he destroyed it. So these were the symbols. Going back into 7 in the Persian mythology, we have 7 sacred elements. 7 sacred flowers, 7 sacred birds, 7 sacred colors, which later became the rainbow, 7 sacred the animals, the senses, all of these were unification of these 7 gods and goddesses. So today, what do we do in Persian New Year? On Nowruz Day, we bring all these 7 symbols together, all these 7 colors, in order to unite these 7 gods and goddesses. We create a symbolic form, and these symbolic stuff spread on the table represents a god or a goddess. Okay, so these are some of the things that we have. Let's talk about the tradition of Halloween. Okay, what is Halloween? Well, in Persian culture, we have a culture that we, on the last Wednesday of New Year, it is called the Red Wednesday or Ash Wednesday, the Dark Wednesday. We call it Ash Wednesday because we have to save the ashes of the wood that we are burning. And on Red Wednesday, it is believed that it was 7 days before Nowruz, and we have 7 sacred mountains in Iran. And 7 days before Nowruz, the beacons are lit. You might have heard that in Lord of the Rings. Light up the beacons so that other kingdoms can help. Well, in these 7 regions of Iran, there's 7 mountains that the beacons are lit, and on the 7th day, then the last beacon is lit. That means the new day has begun. And so what happens is that it is tradition that you light up a candle or some fire or a bonfire, and you have to jump over this fire because it is believed that the soul of Zoroaster cleans everything that you had. You put the past in the past and you start new. And of course, Ahriman, the Dark Lord, doesn't like it, doesn't like light. So when he sees fire and light, he goes, like Dracula, it doesn't like the light, so it doesn't come towards you. And then you save the ashes and you bring it home because you believe that death and darkness will pass by your house. And so this is like a Passover. It passes by you. And so you are safe from the Dark Lord. You are safe from Ahriman. It was also tradition that people would actually color their face and create scary looking faces because they believe they can scare away the dark demons or the dark souls that might attack them. And you would also go and trick them. They would trick each other. So you could also see this tradition of Halloween, of how it comes from that tradition of the Persian culture and mysticism and tradition. We just had Valentine's Day, of course, and of course, Valentine's Day known as Saint Valentine. However, this dates back to many, many thousands of years of celebrating the day that goddess of love, Diana, was born in Iran. She was the god of love, friendship, and beautification. And so she had the power to possess her lovers by creating rose water. This is why then rose water became so famous in the world. And a lot of the women were jealous of Diana because of this. And so there's actually funny stories about how the ancient Persians used to use a protection against Diana so that when they're newlyweds, that Diana doesn't come and steal away their lover. So it was a very, very, there are some cute stories about how there are some protections to protect you from Diana stealing your lover. So it was also believed that Diana, unfortunately, a Moro fell in love with Diana. She fell in love with a Moro, and it was a forbidden love. And so Diana actually sacrificed herself for the Moro to become mortal, and she died after doing that. When she turned into human form, she died, and so that was her tragedy that she died after that. We talked about Easter and how we paint egg and the renewal of Zoroaster or the Lord Light. So these are a lot of the things that we can see that is similar. And now what I like to do is talk about. Oh, let me give a break. Any questions? I'm going too fast. Let me me give
This
a
is just
breakdown.
wonderful.
Let
This
me
is
give
just
it a break.
wonderful, Farima.
Thank you.
And I just love the way some of the symbols, like the winged, it looks
Yes,
very much like the winged Isis from
exactly.
Egypt,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes,
And so
yes,
just the similarities and the
yes.
Passover,
Um,
Pesach, yeah,
yes.
in the
So,
Jewish tradition. I love
what
it.
I like to do is I'll give it like a few minute break if there's any comments or question before I move on. If you have something that you like to ask up till now, and then if not, I can keep talking. Questions, comments? No? Okay.
Yes, please, if you
Yes.
have any
I
questions.
do have a question.
Yes. Yes.
Farima, you're
Yes.
amazing.
Oh, thank
You're
you.
just amazing.
Thank
So
you.
when I think of what you're talking about, and I kind of run it through my filter of Western civilization, what I'm hearing is that the Greeks took it on, and so my question is, the Jews were pretty vibrant 5,000 years ago, and I'm just curious, do you know anything about the relationship between Jewish traditions? Because I don't hear a lot of crossover, and I wonder if they were outside of that sphere, or are there any aspects of Judaism that are reminiscent of this wonderful, wonderful ancient Greek and Persian history?
A very good question. What I'm going to share of what I know. Like you said, a lot of it is outside of this tradition, but what I do want to share from our part is that um, there was a time when, and you might read this in the First Testament, is actually in the First Testament, that the Messiah was known to be Cyrus the Great. They believed that the Messiah, the messenger of God, was Cyrus, the king of Persia. Now, let me tell you a little bit of Cyrus. There was a time that, of course, there was this destruction, and the Babylonians were killing the Jewish population as well, and so they were being massacred. And so there was a prophecy that a man is going to be born to free the Jews, to bring them into a free world. Now, what happened was that at the time, the women were the rulers of the Persian Empire, and we were talking about the Medians. Okay, so the Medians, the Mods, which are actually the Kurds, are the descendants of the Medians. Their temple and their place was in modern day Hamadan in Iran, and so there was word, a prophecy came that the last Median queen is going to give birth to a boy rather than a girl. And this boy is going to be the savior of the Jews. There was a prophecy. And so this went, and this news went on and reached the Babylonian king. He was furious, he was angry, and so he started a war. And guess what he said? He said that all the firstborn children must die. And so that was the time when the firstborns were died. And the Median queen was actually related. She was related to the Babylonian king. She was a long distance cousin of him. And so, and the word came to the Median queen, and she said that we have to do something to save Cyrus. And so Cyrus was actually hidden from the Babylonian king for many years until he was actually a teenager. And people thought that the savior was dead. There was nothing to worry about. And so it was during his teenage years, I believe he was actually 16 or 17, that he led a rebellion against his uncle, the Babylonian king, from Persia. And he basically went into Babylon and took over Babylon, and he basically destroyed the army, and he freed the Jews. And then he said that all the Jews here are welcome into Iran. Give them peace, give them safe travel. And so most of them, about 90% of them, all fled as refugees into the Persian land. And so this is the story that we know. And so based on what they have in the First Testament, they said that Cyrus was the first Messiah, that Cyrus was the one that freed the Jews. And so from the Jewish culture coming into Iran and seeing the Zoroastrian tradition, seeing all these mythical stories, this mingled together. And so that's why we have so much in common, like the Ash Wednesday tradition, like the lighting of the candle. 7 days before, they also light candles. We also light candles. So there's so much mingle here because of this exchange of this cultural exchange, and when they came to Persia. And you should also know that something you don't hear in the media, that actually in Iran we have the highest Jewish population after Israel. We have, and of course we have the highest synagogues in the Middle East, believe it or not, and after Israel. So because of this migration that they all came and they stayed. And if you ever visit Israel, I've never been there, but the people that I know that have visited, they actually do still say that the statue of Cyrus is known to be as the first Messiah, as the first person who freed the Jews in Israel. So that perhaps is that connection that we see so many similarities between the Persians and the land of Israel right now. So I hope I answered some of that question.
That's going to be my question.
Yeah.
You just raised
I have one.
such other questions that I feel like it would be a tangent to go down that road. But just thank you. It's amazing.
Okay. All right. So what I like to do is talk about a little bit of the.
There were some that
Can you hear me?
occurred to me as you were presenting all this. Very interesting and intriguing, and it's the principle of the
Sorry,
archetype.
the voice is getting cut off. I can't hear anything.
I'm breaking
Yeah.
Yeah, that's happening to me. I think maybe it's on my end. So,
My apologies. Sorry,
yeah,
I can't.
That sounds a little bit better. Can you try again, Daniel? It sounds a little bit better.
Can you hear me there? Can you hear me? It goes in and out. I think my connection. So, well, let me know if you can. Can you hear me now?
Very on and off.
Okay.
Why don't you type your question into the
Yes,
chat?
maybe type it in and I can try to
That's
answer.
a great idea. Yeah. And meanwhile, I think Anne, you had
Okay.
something.
Sorry.
Yeah, if you can type it in.
I was just going to say that Chris basically asked the question that I was going to ask, because as you're speaking of the Greeks, especially, the Greeks attacked the Jews a lot too, and so it just seemed to be such a a parallel history. And so I loved what you said, and thank you so much for that
Okay.
information, Farima.
Of course, yes. The Greeks just loved war, loved to attack. So, but the hope. But it was, like I said, I have this funny saying that the Greeks stole our gods and goddesses, but we took their baklava, so it's fine. That's okay. We stole their baklava. We'll call it even. We'll call it even. I'm good with that. And we kind of stole their Greek salad too, so we're good with that. So yeah, that's the funny part. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of our dances and rituals, and how our modern dances and rituals are so connected to the ancient culture as well, and especially in the Persian culture. We know that, of course, a lot of for example, sacred dance rituals, the sacred circle dances that we have, of course, comes from this ring of power. It was believed that when you are moving in this direction, and then when you are dancing in this direction, you are uniting all these kingdoms. You're becoming one with the source of light. there is a book written by Xenophon, as you might know. He was a Greek historian, of course, but he was actually very fond of the Persian Empire, and it was shown that he actually, during the time of Persian New Year, he went to Persia. And he was invited by Cyrus. He was invited by Cyrus the Great, and he was there, and he saw this ritual dance, and that people the women are dancing and churning and churning, and they're falling into the state of ecstasy and screaming and tossing their hair, and he asked Cyrus, he said, Lord, what are these people doing? And Cyrus says that they are worshiping their forefathers and their gods and goddesses. So we have that evidence that, look, the rituals that we do today, the dances that we do today, look how far it dates back. Aristotle in his book 7 also mentions that he also went into the Persian land, and he saw a ritual of people going around a cow, like a bull, and singing and playing the drum and playing bells and whirling. And Aristotle wrote in his book 7 saying that he had seen a ritual that he has never seen before. And he was fascinated by this ritual, and he wants to bring this ritual into Greece. And so, and we see that how later this Greek dance of dancing in circles and holding hands and playing bells, all of that became to that. And so in his book 7, he actually says that he'd never seen anything. And so it was actually, again, I'll give credit to the Greeks here, it was actually Aristotle that said that, I think I'm going to call this a sacred dance, because he didn't know what to call it. He didn't know people didn't know what to call this ritual. So he called it that. I think this is a form of a sacred ritual, a form of sacred dance. And I have never seen anything like this. And so this, again, you could see how this ritual of sacred dance movements, circle dances, comes from that area, because they never seen anything before. These things that you hold hands and dance around the fire, this ritual, again, how it is connected to this Persian culture. And I'd like to also share another beautiful story. When I was in Alaska, I was invited to visit a Dina ritual. The tribe of the Dinas invited me to see a ritual, and I was there, and I was looking at the ritual and seeing their movements and their chanting, and I was just fascinated by it. And I turned around and I told the person who invited me, I said, "This is so much like us. This is what we do." And he smiled and he said, "Well, didn't you know that the Dinas are actually the brothers and sister bloodline of the Persians?" Because, and what happened, and I didn't know this, and he described it, saying that during the time of the Ice Age, believe it or not, today a lot of the lands of Iran is known to be desert land, but we actually had a time that it was ice. It was so much ice, and so it was melting. So guess what happened? The Diana tribes, the followers of the goddess of love, the Diana tribe moved west. They came to the west and they spread out, and this map, they just started to spread out, and they started to bring their culture and their rituals into the west. And so as they came in, later on, there was a story of a Native American man who wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson. He wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson and said that I like to, and Thomas Jefferson called him the Indian man. And he said that what I like you to do is I want you to come and visit our ritual. And Thomas Jefferson wrote in his one of his diaries that when I was there, I saw a ritual that was not very much like the Native American rituals. And when the man told me, he said that I am actually Iranian. I am not this Indian man that you say. I am an Iranian Indian. My bloodline, my ancestors are from the land of Persia. So this is very interesting, because we have this man who is dressed as an Indian, and he's born in this, in North America, and traditionally he's known as Indian. But then he told Thomas Jefferson that my rituals of fire actually dates back to being, I am worshiping the sun god. And so we have this also in the book of Thomas Jefferson. And so we can see this ritual of being passed to North America and even to Alaska, of how they are connected. And we also know that, of course, the law, the 10 commandments, as we say, the 10 rules of Cyrus, later became the 10 commandments, the law of United Nations, which you might see on the United Nations platform, the 10 rules of human rights. That later became the 10 rules of the human rights of the United States Constitution. And it was taken by the book of Cyrus, Cyropedia. If you ever had a chance to read the book of Cyropedia, that is actually the Constitution of the world. And Thomas Jefferson was the one that, when he took this and used the rules of Cyropedia, meaning the rules of Cyrus, and turned it into the United States Constitution. So you can also see that it's an amazing book, the Cyropedia book, and there you can read about how the Xenophon and as well as some stories about Thomas Jefferson, how so many of the Persian rules, political system, the army, was taken by the Persian Empire. Even the educational system that Thomas Jefferson took. So one of the great leaders of this country, Thomas Jefferson, really admired Cyrus and really took a lot of the stuff that we have from Iran. So it's a great book, and I highly recommend you reading it. It's called Cyropedia. So that's a little bit about the whirling rituals, the dance rituals that we have. Next, what I'd like to talk about is some of the movies that you might see. Again, we have basically the Lord of the Rings, the Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Tristan and Isolde, Romeo and Juliet, even Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and what is the other fairy tale? Sleeping Beauty. These are all, believe it or not, are from and Sword and the Stone, King Arthur. These are all written in the book of Shahnameh. So if you have a chance to read the Book of Kings by Ferdowsi, you will start to read and realize, my goodness, these fairy tale stories that I've been told and these movies, they were all there, about almost 1,000 years ago. These were all in this book written. So this book is also very interesting to read, that you can see the names and the names that are used in these fairy tales and these movies. They were all names of actual princesses and prince and queens and empresses of Iran. For example, let's talk about Star Wars. Princess Leia. Princess Leia was actually a princess that was separated by her family in order to be saved, and so she actually was pregnant by her husband, who was the enemy, and she didn't know that he was the enemy, and so she gave birth. But in order to, so she fled she fled, and so in order to save her child, she had to go into hiding, and so the child later was born and became the king and saved the empire. So you could see also how this was related. And the the story of Sword and the Stone, we have Arash, who is known to be Arash the archer, or Arash the hero. He's a hero in the Book of Kings, and during this 7,000-year-old war between the seven kingdoms. Of course, goddess Anahita, who was the mother goddess, was extremely angry of why her children are fighting. This is, these were her children. Humans were of her making. So she punished the kingdom. She punished humanity by giving them 700 years of famine and drought. She said that I will no longer give you water. My source of water will be dry. I will no longer give you rain. You're not allowed to use my water until you learn a lesson to respect each other. And then the prophecy was that only when the purest of hearts can come and lift the sword out of the sacred mountain of Anahita, it is that time that he can basically throw the sword or his arrow into the sky, and rain will fall again. And so nobody could find someone who had a good heart. Even the king didn't have a good heart. And so they went on and on searching for someone who had a good heart. And then later it was found that there was a hero named Arash, the archer, Arash, the arrow. He went one day and passed the 7 levels and went onto the mountain, and he was the one who was able to take the sword out of the mountain, and he threw it up into the clouds, and at that time rain started to come, famine stopped, drought stopped, the war stopped. So you can also see that how this is exactly like the sword and the stone, or the story of Arthur as well. Let's see. I think I am pretty much done. It was believed that Zoroaster, we don't know exactly where he was born. Some say he was born in Balkh, which is today Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan, and that region. And then later they came and said that no, he was born in a sacred mountain, and during where the Medians were. There was a dispute there too. We don't know exactly where he was born. He was born of a light source, so we don't know. And of course, of his death, we don't know, because again, some say he was killed by Ahriman, some say he was betrayed, some say he died of natural causes. We have no idea. He is just this light source that we don't know where it is. But what we know of is that this Mithraism and Zoroastrianism left for us the source of light, that so many cultures then came and took a little piece of it, little by little by little by little, and these pieces, they seeds, they planted into their land, and then it grew, and so they basically mix it with something else, and we can see how one tree gave its branches and its life force, its love to other nation. So to us, we believe that this light, the source, Ahura Mazda, or Mitra, or goddess of light, god of light, was the source that just went out. And it went out, and this is, again, we're talking about 2,000 years before the birth of Christ, before these holidays, before these rituals, and it just spread out. It just spread out, and the beauty of it spread out, and we can see how we are so connected, how we not knowing that we celebrate the exact same thing, but we just don't know it, and it is unfortunate that we fight over it, but at the roots, it's just the one source of light, and his last words were that be good, do good, see good, hear good, feel good, talk good, and understand that my source would be spread around the world. And there is a beautiful inscription in the mountains that it is believed that it is his inscription, saying that after I die, my soul, my light will spread around the nations, and they will hear of me, and they will speak of me, and they will celebrate me in their own forms. So he knew of this. He knew of this, and spread his light. And many actually say that later the Buddha is actually Ahura. And so his light source went into East Asia and became Buddha. And then later in the Western culture, perhaps it became the Messiah. Perhaps it became another soul. So we don't know, but his light is traveling. And so this is a bit of the background of our culture, and hope you enjoyed it. Yeah.
Oh, it is so fantastic, Farima.
Yeah.
May we ask questions
Of course,
about?
this is a Q&A.
Wonderful.
Yes.
And I just would like us to take a deep breath and to breathe in what this amazing woman has given us today. That message that we are one with the light, and that it comes from that pure source of light. And so you truly are a weaver of light, Farima.
Thank you. All of us
Definitely.
are. All of us
Yes,
are spreading our light to each one of us. Yes.
absolutely. So I would like to know how you came to this deep awareness that this is the path you needed to explore.
Sure. So I grew up in a family of artists and mystics. My on my mother's side, they were Iranians, and they were uh, my grandmother was a dancer. My mother was a dancer and a poet and a musician, and I became at that part I became an artist as well. My father's side, they were actually from Azerbaijan. They were from at the time, of course, because of the Soviet Union and the Russian. We can see history repeating itself. Russians came and basically invade Iran, and they took Azerbaijan from us, and so it was split off. And so my father's they were from that side, and so however they were very mystics. My grandmother's side were Zoroastrians actually, and then they were actually from the lineage of, believe it or not, the Magi's. So when I gave my DNA, I realized I actually have the lineage of the three wise men. They were the Scythians and the three wise men, which was very interesting. So they come from that route, and so uh, unfortunately, I never saw my father. My father died during the revolution when I was born, and he was killed during the revolution. But my father's side of the family were very eager because he was a mystic. He was very much into mythology, and he was a pilot, but his source of hobby was following his lineage, and he really wanted to follow his lineage. It's one of his things to my mom was that if my child is born, I want her to be a mystic. That was his dream. And so my father's side really put me into schooling. They actually put me into mystic schools, into Sufi schools, into um, believe it or not, so-called magi schools for me to learn mysticism. And when I was 9 years old, I met my first mystic teacher, and he was the one who guided me. And I started whirling when I was 9. So it was from that age, and then since then I just followed that path, and I think in some ways it's a follower of my father's dream, and him and being in me and wanted me to be this person. And of course the both side of the family were very much supportive of me going into this path, which I find it interesting. Usually, in many might know, in the Eastern culture, a child being born, it's either you have to be a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. That's it. If you say that, oh, I want to be an artist or a mystic, it's like, well, what are you talking about? Yet my family was not like that. They actually wanted me to be, to go and be a dervish, to be a mystic. And so they were very supportive of me, both my father's side and my mother's side. And my grandmothers, both of the grandmothers, were so supportive of me. And it was funny because I remember growing up, and a lot of these stories, when I was in Iran, of course, there was a time of war. when the war was happening, we would go into bunkers. When the bombardments would happen, we would run into bunkers. And my grandmother, and she would always tell, we had no lights, no water, no nothing, and we would have candles, and she would always tell us these fairy tale stories. And that's how I started to learn these things. I remember she would always tell me, she says, that's when I said at the first, she says, these are not fairy tale stories. Just remember, these are real stories, and you need to know them. But we would all get together in the bunkers, and we would just listen to her stories, and she would teach us dancing there, and that's how I learned to learn these dances, these poetry and these stories, and to save them. And so that's one of the interesting stuff. And like I said, and the funny thing was that my mother and my grandmother both being dancers, of course they had their own way of teaching and technique. And I remember I would be dancing in my grandmother's house, and she would yell at me. She's like, I bet you it was your mother who taught you that move. It's wrong. And I would go and dance for my mother, and my mother was like, I bet you your grandmother taught you that move. It's wrong. So I was always stuck between these two fighting. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to make up my own move. I don't need to deal with you fighting. But yeah, I grew up in this family, in this culture, and I'm very thankful. I am very thankful because I don't think many would have the privilege and this rich family or tradition to be able to have this. And part of it, like I said at the beginning, our culture, and unfortunately, due to so much invasion, you have to realize that. Unfortunately, Iran, since the time it was created, it was always being attacked. Believe it or not, if you read history, Iran never attacked any country, never. It was always being attacked. And it was because of its rich culture, rich soil, this belief system, this strength of the woman that it had. So from the time of history, you could look at going back into 10,000 years, it was always being attacked because of this, because of they all wanted a piece of that land, a piece of something. And so it's very beautiful to see that that at least the oral tradition was saved, because the written tradition is either destroyed or been written by the invaders, because they always took something. And so what we hear, unfortunately, in media, what we see in our surrounding, what we often read, it is not the truth, because the truth is in our hearts. It is it is the way that we have to speak it. The media speaks of falsehood. It's fake, and it wants to manipulate. It wants to brainwash people, whereas beautiful stories and these sacred circles and gatherings, they speak the truth. And because it comes from the tradition that has been passed on for thousands and thousands of years, and when we speak it, we are telling the truth. When you're seeing it through television, unfortunately, it's fake. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to hear these stories and be able to pass it down, and hopefully others can also do it. That's why I love to talk about it. I love to teach it, because I want not just me, but others from other cultures to learn and talk about it, and the seeds can still spread and not stop.
Farima, I'd like to ask you something. Can you hear me?
Yes.
When I watch you dance, when you're doing your twirling, it's like you not only go into prayer, but you go into a higher place. Do you feel that when you're doing your twirling, that you kind of leave the ground?
Yes. When you're whirling, when I'm whirling, it's not me anymore. This is why I can go on for a couple hours. I know I mentioned before, I can go on for 5-6 hours and not stop, because it is a state so beautiful that I cannot describe. It is this, you fall into this world that it's beautiful, and you just go on. It's like a dream, as if you're sleeping, and you dream, and the things that you cannot feel, you cannot touch, you cannot see in this material world, you have the ability to see, and we realize how this other life beyond us is so beautiful, and why we should be good people here. and not have ego, because those who have ego will never reach that level. Those without ego are able to see it, are able to see that beauty. And so if and I think anybody has that ability to do it. Anybody can fall into that state of beauty and see it. So yes, it is not me. Something else controls me.
Well, you look
Mhm.
different. You take on a
Yeah.
glow when you're doing the twirling. I mean, you're a beautiful woman, but when you're
Yeah.
twirling, it's more than that. It's your spirituality is shining out, not just the physical beauty. And I was so glad when you were doing your dancing at our center. It was so amazing, and I so appreciated meeting you doing that. Now, are there places that people can go watch you do your dance coming up in the future?
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, because of COVID, so many things have changed, but slowly things are opening up. But uh, there's some stuff on YouTube that you can watch. I often give performances in the community. So if you want to follow me on my website and get some information, please do so. I can put down my website, so you can, or be in my newsletter, and that way you can kind of see where you can come and watch and see and enjoy. And hopefully, when things open up, I can do more dancing for you guys, Dottie.
Well, can anybody twirl? Can anybody do the whirling?
I do have some students here that know. Um, I have yes. I'm going to pick on you. Sarah is here. Sarah's one of my amazing students. She knows how to whirl. Kevin knows how to whirl.
That's wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
And you know what's so wonderful about that is that just radiating that light out as we do the whirling, that's so fantastic.
Isn't it?
What?
Yeah.
Yes, it's amazing. So, Farima, what is your favorite story that you heard in the bunkers? I'm curious
Ah,
about what's your most favorite story?
my favorite stories are the stories of the Amazonian ladies of the Persian Empire, the fighters. They were the fighters. Oh, I would be so excited when my grandmother used to tell me those stories. And because I see myself into them, like this fierce, and so the Amazonian, the Scythians, they were the great archers. They were known to be as the woman archers of, and one of my favorite story is uh, we know of the Iranian Navy commander, General Artemisia, who went to save he was leading the Persian Navy and the army. And at that time the Greeks, the Greco-Romans were invading, and so she led an army and the navy, and she captured Valerian, King Valerian, Emperor Valerian. And so Emperor Valerian, as you know, he was known as to be the living god. Nobody could destroy him. And so she captured him, and the general of Artemisia said that our leader has asked you to kneel, and you're telling the emperor of Roman Empire to kneel. And he says, I will not kneel to anyone except the person who conquered me. And he says, no man can conquer me. And it's a beautiful saying in this book, that the story of when he uh, what was his name? Um, oh God, the king. I know his Farsi name, but I don't know his English name. But it will come to me. And so then General Artemisia comes in and says, it was no man, it was a woman who captured you. And so I would like always jump up and down. I was like, yeah. I would get so excited. I would go so excited. And so at the time, actually, believe it or not, the king then, there's this beautiful quotation um, that says, in Persia, my men have become women, my women have become my men. And so that was the time where the Persian flag was actually changed into the lioness being the center of the flag because of her who was the king? My goodness. Have anybody seen the movie 700? The name I'm trying to find out the name of the king.
What is it? What is it in Farsi?
It's called the seven in Farsi is Khashayar Shah. The story of, let me see. Zigrus, King Zigrus the Great. Yes, there we go. So that was the time where and that whole story changed. So that's one of my favorite stories. I used to get so excited, and I would tell her to say it again, say it again. So these were and King Zigrus, of course, married what's her name? The Jewish princess, as you know, what was it? What's her name? Esther. Esther. He married Esther, as you know. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Those are my stories. The warrior woman's.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I have a question for the modern time. So I don't want to use this to bring anybody down, so I'm trying to keep it, more in the archetypal part. But if there's that many Jewish people in Iran, and at the same time Iran has such a negativity toward Israel, I'm wondering, so my question is, how does that reconcile within Iran? And then more importantly, perhaps, do you happen to have a philosophy about its resolution in the future?
I'm really not into the politics of it, but I know the problem is just between politics. It has nothing to do with the people because you know the travel is there. We have so many Iranians that go to Israel and come back. We have so many Iranian Jews that go and come back, and a lot of it is just between the leaders. It has nothing to do with as we always know, war and conflict is always between two people just don't like each other. So that's all it is. So it's not about the people or it's just about this conflict about that leader doesn't like this leader. But we all know that before the revolution, it was not like this at all. So before the revolution, before 1979, the relation was it was just open borders. We didn't even need visas to visit each other's country. And all of this conflict happened after 1979 because of land, oil, money, greed, the negative ego stuff, unfortunately. So
Oops, that is super, super helpful. I really appreciate it. And it really tells us about keeping the bigger picture in mind.
yeah.
Yeah. And you have opened such an amazing window on, it's what is true, it's what's possible, it's how it's a template for life.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
If we try to put aside the two men fighting, then we'll be fine. If we
Farima,
for always,
as you started talking this evening, I lit this candle. It's one of Janet's candles, and it's yellow. And for us to put our heart and souls and prayers into the Ukrainians right now, whatever religion they are, whatever language they speak, may they have a peaceful outcome of what's going on. And this is in honor of you because you bring peace and you bring this cautionary tale of we have to love each other. And you're a representative of what is all holy and special and good. And so this is because you were here we want to light this for Ukraine.
Thank
You so
you.
much.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, and let's send them a prayer and
Yes.
We have
blessings.
2 candles going here for the same thing, Jen.
And, just the power of what you bring, Farima, because you bring it in such a gentle way, we can take it in. And I really agree with what Chris Brown said in such a beautiful way. It's like, you allow us to take it in a way that we can digest it and we can bring it into our being and we can bring it in gently.
Thank you. Well, I like to conclude with the words of Zoroaster: good words, good deeds, good thoughts, and let that be your daily mantra if you wanted to. Bring that in, bring that good energy in. When we speak good, when good words come out, then we start to hear good things. And when we hear good things, we start to feel good. And that feeling of good, we start to do good things for people. And that cycle just goes on and on. And then we change our surroundings, we change our community, and we can change the world. By just one word of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, we can change the world. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And let us just breathe that all in that Farima has given us. Let us breathe it in, my friends, and let us take it into every cell of our body. See good, feel good, be good, do good, hold good, and shine the light to the world. And just feel the rhythm of all that you are resonating, every cell of your body resonating with this incredible light. Take it in, shine it out. Allow for that light to swirl and completely engulf you in protection, healing, and love. And love. Yeah. And so as we drink from that fountain of light that is available to us, that endless light, may we spread it. May we be gentle with ourselves, and may we be gentle with the world. Every moment, every breath. And as you feel grounded in that, just allow yourself to come back here to this circle that we have all created, being blessed by Farima and her gift of wisdom and of compassion, that we look beyond to that field where we can be together, going back to those ancient principles that still hold true today and are so needed today. Thank you so much. So as you breathe that in, take it in, we breathe it out to the world. And we give great thanks to you, Farima, for allowing us to be with you and be in your presence and be in your wisdom.
Thank you. And thank you so much. And Corky, Dottie, Chris, thank you all so much for always being my supporter, one of my greatest supporters. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Hope you enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you and giving more stories in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so
Wonderful.
much. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Again, if you have any questions in the future, feel free to email me and I'll answer it. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Beautiful.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.